Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we are going to create this really cute fall card featuring the Better Together stamps and dies. We're going to start with our images for today's card. I have the Better Together stamp set here. As you can see, you get a ton of cute little critters in this set. I've pulled off just 4, as well as some of the teeny leaves and a sentiment from that set. I'm going to stamp them onto some white cardstock and intense black ink from Honeybee Stamps. This is a really wonderful ink. It stamps really dark and black, but also is alcohol marker friendly. So now that my images are stamped and the ink has dried thoroughly, I'm now going to start to Copic color them. I'm starting with my lightest shade here for this little rabbit. It's E30, going to color all of the fur in that lighter shade. Then I'm moving on to my darker shade, which is E31, just coloring in what I've determined will be kind of in shadow. And then I go back to E30, which is my lighter shade, and just kind of blend out the transition between the two. I'm going to use those two same markers for kind of the face and belly of my little squirrel. So first colored with E30, then E31, and then blended it out. Now I'm moving on to E13 to color kind of in the rest of his body, his tail, the top of his head, and his legs. And after I've colored in with that E13, I'm moving on to E08 for my darker shade, coloring in where it'd be in shadow, and then going back to that E13 to blend it out. So really simple Copic coloring here. Almost only use 2 markers for every color. So now moving on to my little mouse. This is kind of a warm gray, starting with W1 and then W3 for my dark, and then blending it out with W1. Then I'm going to move on to my raccoon, and instead of doing black, I'm going to stick with the warm grays, starting with W1 for kind of the base of him, but not the dark areas. I'll use a darker warm gray for that. Then back to W3 for my darker shade, and then blending it out with W1 again. Then I'm going to W5, adding a little bit to some of the darker areas on the mouse, and then this is going to be my base for my darker areas. So on the face here, his ears, as well as the stripes on his tail, which I forgot, well, I'll come back to. Now on to W7, which is my darker shade, adding that to my dark areas. Here you see me coloring in those stripes on the tail with W5, and then I'm going to W7. So the raccoon actually has 4 grays, W1, W3, W5, and W7 on him in different areas. So I'm just finishing up blending out the bottom half of him, and now we're going to move on to a little pink for the inner part of the ears, using the same color here for all the ears, coloring kind of the base of the ear, and then blending it out with my colorless blender. So now we're going to move on to the pumpkins, starting with YR00 as a base, and I also colored one of the leaves. Then moving on to YR02, coloring kind of halfway up, and then finishing up with some more of that E08, and then blending it back through with YR2 and then YR00. So now I've finished my pumpkins, moving on to this yellow combo. This is 21, coloring kind of the base of the raccoon sweater, and then YR23 is going to be our shadow for that yellow combo. So Y21 the light, YR23 the dark. Now moving on to our kind of red combo, we're actually starting with E07 and coloring that as a base, and then R59 will be our dark or our shadow, and then of course after I add that 59 I blend it out back with that E07. And I've of course colored a leaf as well as some of the scarves as well. So now we're going to move on to our green combo, starting with YG93 as the base, so this is the light, and then G94 as the dark to add a little shadow here and there. And after I finish that green, I'm almost done. I'm going to grab a brown here and just color in the tops of the pumpkins as well as the little tops of the apple. So here are all my images die cut out with the matching dies. And now we're going to move on to our background. I have the A2 double stitched frames here, and I'm going to die cut an A2 panel of Kraft cardstock with that die. I'm not going to use the frame and put that aside, but I'm going to use that panel here. Now I'm going to ink blend over this panel of Kraft cardstock. I'm starting with Gathered Twigs Distress ink, and I'm just going to ink blend the bottom half with this ink. I'm going to create kind of a gradation with the ink, And once I finish with gathered twigs, I'm going to move on to ground espresso just to kind of darken up the very bottom of it so I have a little bit more of a gradation going on. And I do go back to gathered twigs and just kind of smooth out the transition between those two. Now that panel is done, I'm going to move on to a piece of pattern paper. This is the Halloween Harvest 6x6 paper pad. This is new and I love it. It's so gorgeous. I pulled out this really pretty plaid here. I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to an A2 panel, which you see here, and now I'm going to add it to an A2 top folding white card base. Just going to use my tape runner to add some adhesive to the back of it and stick that right down. After I stick that panel down, I'll then move on to that ink blended craft panel, add a little bit of a liquid glue to the back side of it, and center it and stick that right down to the front of my card base. Once that's in place, it's time for me to arrange all my cute little images and sentiments. I'm going to grab them here and just arrange them over my card front. Once I have everything in place, I'll then grab a big piece of press and seal, place that over all my die cuts, and just give it a little press to pick them all up. I'll flip this over, and now I'm going to add some foam adhesive to the backside of everything, even the little leaves. So I'm going to cut all my pieces, stick them to the back, and now I am removing the backing on that foam adhesive. I'm just going to center them and place them down. And once I place them down, we will actually be done with the card. Well, we have one more thing to do after I place them down. So now that they are stuck down, I'm going to grab my white gel pen and just add a highlight to all of the images. I don't really have a hard, fast rule to where I add the highlight. I just kind of feel where I'll get the most contrast, and that's where I'll add it. And here's the finished card. I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at it. This is such a fun little card. It was nice because I didn't quite go to full scene building. I kind of kept it a little bit more reserved and still got a lot of critters and fun images in. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.